only 22% of people think agriculture is transparent. Less than a quarter of the people out there in the consuming public, according to at least this major survey, felt that this industry is transparent. Do you think that is a good thing? That, to me, sounds like a pretty low benchmark that we can try to improve against, right? Producers need to look at trust, not stunts, as key to advancing the goal of getting more consumers to trust in the food and feed sectors. Really very important, regardless of what part of industry or what piece of the chain you actually take in your day-to-day efforts. You need to think long-term about building trust and not using cute, kitschy gimmicks to try to make someone think that you're being transparent when you're really not. Social license is a term that a lot of folks use. What does it mean? It's kind of like terms sustainability or all natural. They're not necessarily all that easy to define, right? But they're used every day to describe what you do for a living and the kind of products that we consume and that our animals and pets consume as well. Social license, though, is really critical in how we develop trust with consumers. This headline, I think, to me, was maybe the most damning of the bunch. A recent Oklahoma State University food demand survey conducted by economist Jason Lusk reported that 4 out of 10 consumers have lost trust in the food system. Think about that for a moment. If there are 10 of you sitting in the row and you are average consumers, 4 of you don't trust the food system, or at least have lost trust at some point in your life. That's a pretty stark number. And when you talk about the issue of trust, knowing that 40% of the consuming public doesn't trust you in what you do for a living, that should give you pause. And more importantly, to think about why don't they trust you? What are the issues that get us to this area of transparency, trust, and building a good relationship with the consuming public? Bottom line is there are a lot of reasons why consumers have trust issues. Perception is one of them. I've given you a series of pictures to think about what farmers and manufacturers really do versus what consumers actually see. Think about the way it used to be, the good old days, whether we're talking about manufacturing and production, whether we're talking about food production and agriculture, the pictures that a consumer might have in their mind's eye of how we produce food is probably very different from reality, right? We're a long way removed from grandma and grandpa on the farm raising their 5 kids. Grandpa wears bib overalls, probably chews tobacco, has a wheat straw in his teeth and a battered hat, drives an old pickup truck. When in reality, the nation's food producers today are every bit as much the business person as you or I, right? They have to manage massive operations, large capital-intensive inputs, very much in tune to risk management and the changing trends that the economic factors of the world deal their business operations, right? But perception, alas, is reality. One of my favorite movies, Men in Black, starring Tommy Lee Jones, great actor. And Tommy Lee in that movie, how many of you have seen it? A couple in here certainly. It's actually kind of a classic film now. It's like 15 years old, which makes me feel really old. Tommy Lee Jones' character says, and I quote, "A person is smart, but people are panicky, dumb, dangerous animals, and you know it." Think herd mentality, and now apply it to the social media sphere. How many times have you seen something pop up in your Facebook or Twitter feed and said, that's not right? But before you know it, 5, 10, 50 people have liked or, God forbid, shared or retweeted that post that you knew was factually inerrant or just plain dumb. It happens every day, right? Multiple times a day. Thinking about the millions of people on Facebook and Twitter. By the way, Facebook is now like the 3rd largest country in the world if you aggregated all of its users. And the only reason it's not bigger than China is because China has the Great Firewall of China, right? And you get beheaded or something if you use Facebook. I'm being a little facetious and overboard in my hyperbole, but you get the idea. Facebook, and to a lesser extent Twitter and other social media networks, are huge when it comes to this question of how we develop trust and how we can deal with some of the issues that consumers have with agriculture and feed and food manufacturing. Here's the challenge. Some of us in the room hear me talk about transparency and hear about a spokesman in a moment of weakness making a big faux pas, putting his proverbial foot in his mouth. and probably think that means you should clam up and never say anything to the media again. You should shut down your Facebook page, shut down your Twitter feed, and batten down the hatches. If that's your gut reaction, I understand. Here's the problem. It doesn't work that way anymore. For many, many years, manufacturing was a closed system, right? It was a black box. Stuff comes in, stuff goes out. What happens in the box doesn't come out. You don't see what happens in the box. Food animal production, much the same thing, right? Feed goes in, meat comes out. We don't need to discuss what happens in between. But today, thanks in part to Facebook and Twitter, and thanks in part to the fact that consumers really want to know where stuff comes from and how it's made, at least at some level, we can't afford to be a black box anymore. Words have consequences. If you take away nothing else from our time together today, I want you to write down or retweet, or whatever you're doing to take notes, this phrase: words have consequences. What you say matters almost as much or more than how you say it in the day and age where anything can be quoted, requoted. Facebook liked, posted, shared, tweeted, retweeted, and favorited. In the day where words are immediately put under the scrutiny of a million microscopes, you can't afford to be dumb anymore. There was a time where there was a certain amount of institutional ineptitude that we could accept, right? There was a time where we could be not brilliant at this whole PR and marketing thing when it comes to the macro sphere and the social warm and fuzzy side of society. Those days are gone, as some of the stories we've been talking about clearly illustrate. The good news is, because I don't want to leave you on a downer, is that there is a really bright future ahead because we have more in common than we realize. You and I get up, eat breakfast, put our shoes and socks on, and go to work. It's just like everybody else. At the end of the day, you've got to decide how you're going to spend your food dollars, your disposable income, and how you feel about a given product will dictate how you then decide to spend those limited disposable dollars. When we look at some of these different issues that people are concerned about, say antibiotic use, genetically modified organisms, whether we talk about animal care and humane handling, by and large, the values, and that's the important word, values, that consumers have at the core of their being are the same values that you have at the core of your being. And that's where we can build a bridge, and that's why I say there's a bright future. If we were starting from vastly different values, I wouldn't be nearly so optimistic. But because we care about the same things that they care about, we have a place from where we can begin a dialogue and a conversation.